I did 11 different strategic reorgs,
Wow.
which meant I got very good at doing something that I hated doing.
All right, Andrew, you ready to start this party?
Yes, sir, Kevin.
All right.
Episode 141, I feel like I had some good groundwork laid here for me.
Are you ready?
All right.
Timeout. Tyler, March Madness coming up. Who are we sitting down with today?
Oh, Kev, you can't throw me off like that and me start thinking about my Razorbacks, man. But ladies and gentlemen of America, we have Andrew Wilder, the Chief Security Officer at VetCorps. And Andrew, thanks for being on the show today. We usually ask you how you're doing, how the weather is, but no one cares about that. So we're going to dive right in. You good with that?
Yes, sir.
All right, Andrew. So I was thinking, man, so Kevin's up in Rochester, New York. And if he were to fly down to St. Louis, do you have a favorite St. Louis rib spot we'd take him to?
So usually the best one is called Pappy's. Now Pappy's is one of those line out the door kind of places. So if you don't get there at the right time, you're going to be stuck waiting for it, but you wait for it because it's worth it. Now, don't tell any of my St. Louis friends this. I'm sure they'll figure this out when they watch the episode, but I'm more of a KC barbecue guy. Love me some Kansas City barbecue, and Kansas City is only like 4 hours away, so it's not that bad. But
all right, now I'm not a novice with barbecue as much as Tyler. He used to get barbecue going up here in Rochester. What's the difference between St. Louis and Kansas City style?
So St. Louis style has a lot of the kind of the sweet sauce to it. Kansas City has more of a molassesy, a little bit of heat in there. So I like the sauce better in Kansas City. I think that's really about it. But both of them are, pork rib is the number one. I'll eat some pork ribs. I like brisket too, I like barbecue all over the place, man. Whatever you got.
You had me with heat, so I'll side with you with the Kansas City style.
Yeah.
Well, and so a little, KC's a little sweet, Andrew, and I'm a Texan now, guys. So we like frown on Kansas City now because I was born in or raised in Northwest Arkansas, so I had the Gates. The Oklahoma Joe's wasn't a big thing. Arthur Bryant's back in the day. But Andrew, if you're walking out of Busch Stadium, bottom of the ninth, out of the bullpen to close a game, what's your closing music to end this sucker?
What's my closing music? Probably Thunderstruck by AC/DC.
Ooh, yeah.
That's also usually my walk-on music when I go onto a stage. So either one, it fits either situation. It's a very versatile song.
All right.
I like the intro to it too.
Out of all the movies, you're the lead actor. What role would you want to play out of any of the movies? Have you ever?
I'd like to play the man with no name in all the spaghetti westerns, right? The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Fistful of Dollars, A Few Dollars More. Wear that same poncho in every movie and never take it off. That's who I'd be.
Andrew, I like how you are decisive.
Boom!
You know what you want in life, man.
That's right. I tell my 4-year-old that every day. It's important to know what you wanted. He knows, and I know too.
Yeah, man. And who is Andrew after you punch out? And I'm sure you don't really punch out at work, but what's the after 5 life look like for you?
So as I mentioned, I have a 4-year-old, so a lot of time playing with him. I didn't know that I have a 4-year-old at this age, but I realize every time I'm like crawling around on the floor playing Army Men's or hide and seek for the 1,000th time, I realize if I wasn't doing that, I would probably be sitting on the couch and drinking beer and watching sports, right? So it's good for me, right? It's helping me stay alive and stay active, and so we play outside a lot. He's got a few friends in the neighborhood. We'll try and go bother their parents for a while, and it's we have a lot of fun. Especially when the weather's good.
What was the greatest lesson or observation when your 4-year-old first blessed us on Earth?
The greatest lesson or observation. In fact, I'm not going to give the greatest one. I'm going to give one that happened yesterday. So yesterday, my older son was over, and we were talking about what we were going to order for dinner. And I said, you know what, guys? I'd like to get Red Robin. I'd like to get Red Lobster. I'd like to get a nice salmon. And they had this thing at Red Lobster called the Salmon Bowl. Right? It was perfect for me. It was like rice and Brussels sprouts and salmon. It was really good. And then I said, oh, you know what, guys? They don't have the they don't have the salmon bowl anymore. And now you can just get the, salmon meal or whatever. It's totally different. And so then my older son said, Dad, are you sad? And I said, yeah, I'm sad. So we ended up going somewhere else. We met my wife at another place while she was on her way home from work, and we went there. We had a really nice dinner. So when my wife is putting my son to bed last night, he's got the look on his face like he's going to start crying. And she says, what's wrong? And he says, Red Lobster stopped making that salmon bowl. And Dad is really sad about it. And he starts crying. He starts weeping about it, feeling so bad for me. And he says, and Dad's really sad. He really loved that salmon bowl, and they just don't make it anymore, Mom. And he's crying about it. So this morning on the way to school, we had to talk about the word empathy. And I didn't tell him, like, it's not a big deal. I told him, look, I really appreciate how much empathy you have and how much you love me and you care that I'm upset about that salmon bowl, which it was. Hey, Red Lobster, if you're listening, you got to bring that salmon bowl back.
Okay? You better. I mean, after that story,
my son is crying at night about it.
Yeah. We're going to file our grievances with all of Red Lobster.
Uh-huh.
That's a great story. But I love what you said. I mean, teaching empathy is tough.
That's right. That's right.
But it's empathy is compassion in action. It's the action of actually living that, and that's awesome. That's a great story. I appreciate that.
You got it,
dude. Yeah, man. And going off that, so I've learned a lot from my 3-year-old. On because I know you have a super serious job, Andrew, and you have in the past. And have you noticed how that's alleviated a little bit from you with kids at all, or has it been like?
So during the 18 years I was at Nestlé, like especially toward like the last 2 years when I was regional CISO of Americas, Asia, and Europe, I had a team in Europe, I had a team in the Americas, and I had a team in Asia. So I didn't really sleep very well. And thankfully, my son was born probably 4 months before I left Nestlé, 3 or 4 months. And when I came back from paternity leave, that's when I talked to my boss, and he was like, look, your next job is my job. I'm not going anywhere. Let me help you find another CISO role, because it was clear to me and it was clear to him that like this working 14, 16-hour days was not going to be sustainable for me anymore as a new father once again. So I think that's part of it.
Yeah. It's amazing how much our kids can teach us. And
yeah. Oh, yes.
If you stay present and just seeing how present they are, they're not worried about what happened yesterday or what's going to happen tomorrow. They're fully in that moment.
Have you guys read this book, the Dale Carnegie book, How to Win Friends and Influence People?
Yeah.
So I love that book, and I reread it. I think it was last year. It could have been 2 years ago now. And there's a poem that he reads in chapter 2 of the book.
Mm-hmm.
And the poem is called A Father's Lament. And apparently it was a very popular poem, like in the 1930s. It was translated into hundreds of languages and read all over the world. And it's a story of this, I guess it's a story, it's a poem. So it's a story of this father, and the son wakes up in the morning, and he really gives him a hard time about, washing his hands and cleaning up after breakfast and putting his elbows on the table and stuff. And then he goes to work and he comes home, he sees the son again, and he's playing in the street and his knees are dirty, and he gives him a hard time and keeps just giving his kid a hard time the whole time. And then before the son goes to bed, he runs into his office where he's reading his newspaper and gives him a big hug and says, I love you, Daddy. And he goes to bed. And then he has this moment of reflection, and he goes upstairs and he sees his, very young son sleeping in his bed, and he's struck by emotion. And he says this phrase that, since rereading that book and having now, at the time, I think a 3-year-old, but a 4-year-old, he says, he's just a little boy. He's just a little boy. He's just a little boy. And I've been measuring him with the yardstick of a man. And so after hearing that, my relationship with my son, who I think was 3 at the time, completely changed. And I became a different father. And when he would say, Dad, can we do this? Whatever this is, I would say yes. Can we play hide and seek again? Yes. Can we go outside and play? Yes. So I try to find a way to say yes all the time, unless, of course, it's a safety issue. And and I explain to him, look, I love you. I want to be able to say yes to everything, but we can't do things that are unsafe. And that relationship change has also changed my relationship with my wife and with other people, because they see that and that makes them happier and feel better. So, man, if everybody can remember today the poem, and I don't a father's lament, and he's just a little boy, he's just a little boy. Of course, you can use that for girls as well, but man, that was a life changer for me. Just rereading that book and remembering that poem and thinking about it in a new context.
Absolutely. Powerful. I mean, it's just changes your whole perspective on what it is. I think I was talking to my son the other day, who was 4.5, so similar age, and he said he wants to be older, right? And I remember being at that age, I always wanted to be older. He's like, I want to work, or I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I was like, when you get to my age, I want to be your age. And you almost want to keep wishing your life away. And I said, like, days back then just felt like months, and now days now feel like seconds. And it's just amazing to really take that all into perspective and change that. I appreciate
I think
that.
part of the passage of time thing, though, I do agree that it gets more rapid the older that you get. But I think part of it is how busy we are, because time passes really quickly when you've got notifications on your phone and you got emails and meetings and all this kind of stuff. So the less busy that you can get, the slower time will pass. And you can see that sometimes, like when you go on vacation and it feels like days take longer than they do when you're at home. I think that's a
Yeah.
powerful thing. It's getting less busy. I think it was Warren Buffett who said, like, busy is the new stupid or something like that.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I read this great book called Do Nothing, because I think a lot of
Yes.
times we just it's amazing how in society being busy is now like this social currency. If you're
Yeah.
not busy, everybody thinks something's wrong with you,
Yeah.
but yeah, and I think a lot has to be said on that time equation too, is presence, I mean, they're using all 5 senses in all situations and all environments where we're like, yeah, I've smelled that smell 100 times and now it's like white noise, or I've
Exactly. I heard a word the other day called phubbing. You guys heard this word?
no.
Loving?
So phubbing is an abbreviation for phone snubbing.
Huh.
And it's what parents do to their kids all the time. So you're on your phone, you're doing something, it's important, and your kid comes and says, "Daddy, can we do this? Can I have a drink of this or whatever?" And hold on, I'm busy. I'm on my phone doing my thing, or just completely ignore what they're saying. So actually hearing that word and putting a name to it made it more powerful to me and made me think about how I cannot do that. I don't know if you guys have done this, but sometimes on the weekends, I've done a 0 phone day, where I just put my phone away, and for the whole day of the weekend, I don't do it. Now, I'll tell my older kids, like, "Hey, I'm not going to use my phone today. If you need something, you can call my wife or whatever." But uh, being disconnected sometimes is just glorious.
Being intentional about it. There was nothing better back in the day when my cell phone broke. It was like, I was like, yeah, people can't get a hold of me. It's actually not a bad thing.
Yes.
Andrew, do you think we're wired like that? Like, I'm like a true '90s guy, and like my
Okay.
parents never switched jobs. Their parents were farmers. Like, and it even sucked into my genetic pool as well. Like, it's hard for me to break away and not feel the grind. But what I've
Yeah.
also noticed is when I let things go, things are still there later that I can do.
Yep.
I've learned that.
Yep.
But do you think we're wired like that, or do you have some sense of that, like that our generation?
So I'm reading a book right now called The Anxious Generation. For you guys that both have
Yeah, I
kids,
saw that. I
highly
almost picked it
recommend that
up.
one.
Yeah.
That it's quite good. And it really talks about social media and phones and the impact they have on children. And there's the part that I'm reading right now is he talks about like to go as low as possible or as far down your brainstem as possible. And so all the motivation of these things is to keep you on it as long as possible so that they can sell more ads to you, and to get you to engage with it as much as possible. And it has a lot of kind of like Las Vegas tricks to it, like likes and refreshes and never-ending bottoms to just keep you engaged, and so you forget about what else that you need to do in your life, and spending time with your kids or your family or whatever, and just have you addicted to this little screen all the time. So I think human beings are wired for a lot of those kind of things of kind of instant gratification and stuff, and that social media companies have monopolized on that to get our attention, which is their main goal. And also to get the attention of like 10-year-olds and 8-year-olds and, you know, as young as possible, because that creates new users and new advertisement for them in the future. And if not, it's kind of you know, they'll go out of existence, right? If they don't have new influx of people coming in all the time.
Right, and what hit me the other day is I was hearing Jensen from NVIDIA on a podcast, and I didn't realize that these top big companies, all at the end of the day, they're ad companies.
Yes.
You know, and I think his quote was like, "We're actually technology." You know, he kind of said it kind of stern, and I was like driving, I was like, "Holy!" I was like, "How did that pass my brain?" Like,
Yep.
you know, the biggest companies out there are literally just for me to buy things at
Yep.
the end of the day.
Yep. And you know, 50 years ago, advertising companies had to kind of blitz advertise to everyone. There was no kind of direct targeting. But hey, because I know Tyler and I know that he likes baseball, you know, I know that he's going to be interested in this thing. So as much as they can get data from you, and there's a famous quote that says, if the tool is free, you are the product. So when you use any social media, you are the product. Right?
Okay.
They're selling you. They're selling access to you, time with you, advertisement to you, direct advertisement to you. There's a famous story about Target and data analytics for direct advertising. And I don't know if it was a CEO or some VP or something at Target went to his data analytics team and he said, "Hey, can you tell based on purchase history if a woman is pregnant?" And they're like, "Absolutely, we can do that." So they look up, you know, your Target card history or whatever. And so then they will send targeted advertisements to your house. So in one case, this father of a teenage girl gets advertisements from Target at his house selling all of this baby stuff. And he's like, "Where is this coming from?" So sure enough, the girl had been buying stuff that a pregnant person would buy, and she was pregnant and the father didn't know it, and Target direct advertised them. And so, you know, a lot of this, there's a lot of things that can happen because of targeted direct advertising and the amount of data that's out there about you and about your family and all that kind of stuff. So it's scary. And this was a while ago. I mean, think about today. It's
Oh,
Well, I
yeah.
think like it's also slowly conditioning, right? So you take those consumer
Mhm.
behaviors, they now become consumer expectations, right? And it's this exchange, right? I'm willing to give up my privacy in order to have this customized experience.
Yeah.
And then on the employer side, that's where I start to see that consumerism enter into the employer side. Like I'm special, right? So if I'm not given these things in the way that I expect them or need them, I'm going to leave, or
Mhm.
it's not happening fast enough. And you can start to see where some of those social elements are now entering the workforce. And it's really, really interesting to me, especially how individualized they expect that experience to be. And smart, right, employers, yes, establishing the right boundaries, but also providing that unique experience is helpful.
Yeah.
But it's that we have eroded that, and not in a bad way, between work and life. But you can see how consumerism is really changing the expectations of employees and their experience that they expect.
Absolutely.
Yeah, man,
When
and
you
oh, go for it,
so,
Kev.
so sorry, so you were at Nestle for quite some time, 18
Yeah.
years. You mentioned kind of this pivotal moment in your career was when you were having your first child. Walk us back through that experience, because 18 years, right, at any organization, it can be tough to leave.
Yeah.
Um, how did you renew yourself? How did you step into that next role? What was a part of that decision making for you as you started that transitionary period outside of having the children and going from 12 and
Yeah.
14-hour days?
Yeah. So just to clarify for my older kids who may be listening, it was my third child, but
Okay, sorry.
my first child in many years. So it was very difficult to do that. And I credit my leader at the time, who's the global CISO of Nestle, and he was the one who really came to me and said, "Look, your next job is my job. I'm not going anywhere. Let me help you find a CISO job that will fit for you." And so I went from a $90 billion company to a $3 billion company that was, it was still global, but the majority of my team was based in the US and India, and our India team worked kind of, half US hours. So I didn't have the same time constraints on me that I had before. As Tyler said before, a CISO never really checks out. You're always kind of waiting for that midnight phone call or something. But it was a lot less pressure than Nestle was. Even though I was the one, running the show, I went from a team of like 60 to a team of like 15. So that made things easier as well. But it was a good career move. I'm very glad that I did it. I'm super glad that I was supported in doing that as well. One of the things when I talk to others about your career and mentors and development and all that stuff is I always tell them no one's going to care more about your career than you do. So don't wait for HR to do that for you. Don't wait for your manager to do that for you. Now, you may get a leader who is a very good leader who knows that their job is to help you in your career, but a lot of people are selfish. And they don't want to lose their best talent, and they're not going to help you to go and promote, especially if it's outside of the organization or outside of their team. So that's important. You really need to look out for yourself in that way.
Yeah. I think people are so tempted to take that victim mindset, right, when it comes to
Yeah,
their career,
yeah.
but
It's a scary thing to do, man. Like, is this going to be right? Is this going to work out well for my family and my livelihood? And it's a big jump to take. So
Yeah. Well, I think that no one's going to save you, and advocating for yourself, and I think sometimes, I mean, growing up in my family, right, seniority, age, like you didn't really do that, especially on the family side. To convert that way of thinking into the professional space, I was very submissive, and then you don't speak up, and then all of a sudden, then resentment builds, and then your only
yep,
really option, because you kind of co-created that situation, is to leave in a lot of cases, because then it's that gap is just so far, even though you missed all the opportunities to, I guess, actually change what you expected to change.
Yeah. And Andrew, was that the same fella that asked you who your team was?
no,
That-
there was another person. I could tell you really did listen to my podcast, Tyler. It was another person who asked me who my team was. So one of the interesting things about Nestle was being in a very matrixed organization. So while I was there, I was on 5 different leadership teams, and that
Wow.
means 5 different like sets of stakeholders and tons of relationship building. Now, if you're at a place for 18 years, it's pretty easy to build, good and long-term relationships. But as you enter a new leadership team, you have to kind of, vet everyone and learn about them and see what they're, the things that they want and the things that they don't want and meet them as a person. So a lot of Nestle was building those relationships across boundaries. And it was harder to do, of course, with COVID and, not being able to be in person. It's hard to build relationships with people just over Zoom. But it's something that you do and that you have to do in some scenarios, but a very important part of life in a super matrix political organization.
Oh, I can imagine. And who would you say your team is today if you had that same
Well,
question?
my team is still the same answer. My team is my team, the people that report to me. Now, the person who asked me that question wanted to say that it was that leadership team, which was one of 4 that I was on. And I mean, again, I understand that philosophy that they want that to be your team, but I think my team will always be the people that are reporting to me. Besides the goal of helping them advance in their career, the other thing that I'm there for is to provide a safe space for them to succeed. So it's usually about removing roadblocks, resources, financial, political roadblocks, whatever those things are. But that's my goal as a leader, is to do that for my team. And if I think that my team is my peers or another matrix team in another part of the organization, that's not giving them enough focus and credit, I think.
Fascinating. And I saw just perusing kind of your LinkedIn is you had a certification from Harvard in leading through digital disruption.
Yeah.
Talk to me about how you get your team through like uncertainty, disruption, obstacles, challenges. Because sometimes change can be scary, right? But how do you navigate some of those avenues with your team? How do you coach them for those moments, right? These pivotal moments that the team might experience, that adversity.
That's a great question, Kevin. Unfortunately, at Nestle, during my 18 years, I did 11 different strategic reorgs, which meant I got very good at doing something that I hated doing. And a lot of people thought when I left that it was because there was the 18th one was happening right then, or I'm sorry, the 11th one was happening right then. But I think the biggest thing that you can do in these situations is to be yourself, be open, be vulnerable, give people the why behind it. And I tried to do that every time. And, having to fire someone who's worked with you for 10 or 15 years is a nightmare. You don't sleep well at night, knowing that you have to do this stuff. It's very emotional and it's hard. I'm sure there are some people who don't feel that way, but I never stopped feeling that way. And building other teams in other countries or other places or offshoring or nearshoring and all that stuff. Those are good things to do, I think. But, having to get rid of people who've given their time and their energy and their life to a certain organization is hard to do, man.
Mm-hmm. I love what you said. Got really good at something that I hated to do. It's that.
I mean, I could do it again, but I wouldn't choose to do it again. And I'll tell you that in all of the other organizations that I've been at since I left Nestle, none of them have gone through any of those kind of strategic reorgs. Now we did offshoring, but we didn't do it to eliminate other people. We just did it instead of hiring additional, FTEs. We'd get some other resources in other countries.
Cool.
Andrew, how'd you learn how to be so decisive? Like when you speak, your words carry some weight.
I don't know that I have an answer for that one, Tyler. I think it's just kind of who I am.
Who you are. It's just A to B. This is how it is. Does your team love you? I think is that one of your strong suits, you think?
Does my team love me, or do they love that I'm so decisive? I don't know. I guess I'd have to ask them that. I hope that they like that. I think they're pretty happy that I like to do things, like to get things done. One of the feedbacks that I got over all the 18 years at Nestle was that if you wanted to get something done, give it to Andrew and he will make sure that it happens. So I'm okay with having that reputation. There at some point when people started talking about agile and minimum viable product, I realized that this is the philosophy that I've been using my entire career, right? Like go 80% good enough, and then here's what we got, and then let's iterate on it to make it better. But let's get something out the door as quickly as we can. So that's kind of my way of working. And the other thing that helps a lot is when I have peers who are very methodical, because then we will kind of balance each other where I'm going, hey, let's get this out next week. And here it is, it's good enough. And they'll go, no, we need to fix all and change all of these things. At one point I was head of North America security and another guy was head of Latin America security. And he was very methodical, and it worked so well, that partnership, because we worked together on things and I'd try and move fast and he'd try, I wouldn't say try to move slow, but he'd try and make things, 100%. They say like perfection is the enemy of good. And so I was good and he was perfection. And, and then we got something that was better than I would have given and faster than what he would have given. So it's that balance, I think, that makes things good.
Oh, it's so cool.
Diversity of thought.
It's only happened to me a few times when someone's a little more organized than me, but I'm like the cannonball,
Right.
I cannonball in the ocean, blow some things up, live to tell the story. And that's how I learned. But you're right though. It's honestly me and Bryce at nighttime when we're working together. Andrew, he's like super, like he's almost like a PC man, and I'm just not that. But it's just like when you see the beauty of it mixed, I'm like, this is what people talk about. I think work with someone totally opposite of you, but somehow it works even better rather than me working with someone like me.
Yeah.
Andrew, I wanted to dive into so now you're presenting to boards. I think can you give us where you are now, so that you've done it now? Because I think you used to pass on along information to your global CISO at Nestle, and he would present to the board, is what I learned from you on your other podcast. But
man, this guy did his research. I'm telling you.
yeah, and we had a fun conversation with the VP at Microsoft about this like 2 weeks ago. Like, what would you do differently from the first time you presented to the board? Have you learned anything from actually doing it?
Yeah, that's a fair question. So the CEO at one of the companies that I work for gave me some really positive advice, which was when she joined a board herself, it gave her a very different understanding of what is needed from her when she presents to the board. So what I have done, I'm on 2 nonprofit boards, and one of them is called CyberUp. Going to give a shout out to CyberUp. CyberUp helps all phases of cybersecurity. So starting in like elementary school, and then people who are looking to move into cyber as a career, they provide free training, and then they place them as apprentices. It's a wonderful program. So I'm now the president of the board of CyberUp, and I understand what is needed from the CEO and his directors to deliver to the board to help us to make the right decisions. And so having that perspective, now it's not everyone that can join a board and then get that perspective, but a lot of nonprofits will, are looking for experienced leaders to join their board. So if you're not doing that, I highly recommend that you figure out how to do that. And that gives me a unique perspective to understand when I present to the board, what are the things that they need to do? Because there's a very famous saying about boards called noses in, fingers out, right? So they're not there to make management decisions. They're not there to tell you what to do. They're there to ask really good questions that make you think about how you can do things better or fix things. So that's really the purpose of the board is to drive strategy in a way by saying, hey, I have a lot of experience. Here's what I would think about. Here's kind of the things that I would do. And reporting to the board and being part of the audit committee or whatever can be really daunting. The other thing I would say is the first time you're going to do that, if you're a new CISO and it's your first time presenting to the board, go talk to some of your peers who do it regularly and see what kind of things they're bringing. One other thing that was really positive for me that I did was I started bringing the CIS controls. I would bring 2 to every board meeting and just talk about what they are, what we're doing to address them. And so it was kind of every time trying to elevate the cyber maturity level of the board through the board meetings. And maybe it would just be in the pre-read, but we'd talk about it too. So sorry, that was
noses in, fingers out.
I gave you like 3 answers.
Yeah, you're good. I like the noses in, fingers out, man. I'm going to use that. That makes a little sense to me.
Feel free. I didn't make that up, but feel free to take it.
Okay.
I want to go back when you talked about going through adversity, because I think that's honestly where leaders I think show their true colors. And some of the things that you said is be open, be yourself, be vulnerable, educate around the why. Because I've been around enough leaders myself, when shit hits the fan, that's when control starts to take over. Fear kicks in, and so they want to control, they want to manipulate, they want to deceive almost. And I think those are important points to genuinely be vulnerable, because I think others really project their insecurities or project their expectations. How did you get comfortable with Andrew, like the man in the mirror? How did you get to this point where to serve others? You mentioned a little bit how you lead your team. You also mentioned a little bit about how you're on these nonprofits, but where and how and when did Andrew really determine who he was and what you wanted to be so you could be so decisive? And I hear a lot of accountability with the decisions and choices that you're making.
Yeah. I don't think that there is a specific pivotal moment that I can remember. I know that it was about halfway through my career at Nestlé when I transitioned from being a manager to being a leader. And I think those words really are important to understand. I think a manager is someone who is a super technical expert who is telling people what to do. A lot of times in those reorgs, we would make mistakes by taking the best network guy and making him the manager of the network team. And that's not always a good thing to do. Right? Sometimes those people are not good people leaders. And when I started being a leader, I changed my philosophy, right? And we talked before about helping my team advance in their career, here to remove roadblocks. There's a great quote I love from Steve Jobs where he says, "We don't hire great people to tell them what to do. We hire great people to tell us what to do." And so I became someone who got very comfortable with failure and very comfortable with crazy ideas. And so before, when I was a manager and someone would come with what I thought was a crazy idea, I would say, "Nope, that's crazy. We're going to do this. This is what we should do." And then as a leader, I changed to say, "Well, that sounds pretty crazy to me, but let's try it and see what happens."
Yeah.
Right? They're like, fail fast, learn fast. And I think people learn much better if you allow them to make mistakes rather than tell them, "No, here's the right way to do it." And the other thing that you'll find as you have diversity of thought within your organization is things that you might think were crazy or wouldn't work or were dumb or whatever end up being great solutions to problems. So I think part of it was realizing that I didn't know everything. And that relying on my team that we were hiring as subject matter experts to be able to do these things and empowering them to make decisions at certain levels. And sometimes saying like, "Hey, if we're going to spend, $10 million on something, let's talk about it first." But, empowering them to be able to make decisions in their area and fail and learn and all of that stuff. I think that's how it changed. But again, I don't remember it
Yeah,
was
no, but I
it was
love
May 8th, 2014. It was that exact day,
yeah, but taking us through that evolution, right, of from a manager to a leader, and I loved what you said. Like I didn't need to know everything, and
Yep.
I think that's the epitome of what trust truly is. And when I feel trusted, right, or valued and appreciated, I can take chances, I can take risks,
Yep.
within reason, obviously. But if I'm not in that environment, I'm just going to be wait to be told what to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it kind of removes the unknown for me, and once you remove the unknown for me, I'm semi-dangerous in this game of life, I think. And I wanted to kind of segue into the unknown, Andrew, about the kids right now in college. Um, the AI push. Like, what would you tell a kid right now coming out of school that
Oh,
just
man.
went through the basic, like, because I have other friends like you, Andrew, and they honestly tell me they're not learning what they need to be learning right now. What advice? And I give my best advice. I link him up with other CISOs and stuff just to give him a little vision, because
Mhm.
the books aren't doing it. I don't think. Hiring right out of college with this AI push. But if you were coaching I don't know, an 18-year-old kid getting his bachelor's in computer sci, what are you telling him to do right now?
That's a super loaded question. My second favorite podcast after Timeout with Leaders is Diary of a CEO. And this, I don't know if you guys have seen this one, but this guy has some incredible leaders in the AI space, thought leaders. Check out Diary of a CEO. Look for some around AI. He's had some panels and then some great thought leaders on there. And one of the guys in that podcast, they asked the same question that you just asked me, and he said, "I would tell them to be a plumber." So I think one of the things that you need to think about is, how is AI going to transform jobs in the future? And what can you do to get ahead of that? And what are the things that remain uniquely human? Another part of the other book that I was talking about before, which was the Anxious Generation, is it talks a lot about the difference between a play-based childhood and a phone-based childhood.
Mm,
And that freedom of play where you can fall and get hurt, and kids on the playground together or in the neighborhood, those are things that establish a lot of psychology of leadership and hierarchy and friendships and trust and all of these things that are very difficult to develop, when you're playing Call of Duty or on Instagram or whatever. That they don't serve the same purpose. So I would really encourage them to understand how to relate to other human beings.
yes.
And I don't know what is the best, major for that, whether it's sales or philosophy or something like that. But also, I would say look at, technical trade schools like air conditioning and plumbing and stuff like that. Not making a joke here, because those are things that will be harder um, to automate. Not that they won't be, and that there couldn't be a robot that comes to your house and fixes your plumbing or something. But um, I don't know. That's a crazy question, and I wish I had a better answer for you, Tyler.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
do. That's why I pass them on to smarter people than me, Andrew. Honestly, but I am learning a little bit. At least I know that. Instead of just hyping them all up for their their bachelors in computer science, thinking they're gonna be whatever someday. And
Yeah.
what hit me was that AI thing hit me, Andrew. Like as soon as I saw that note taker, because I've placed about 150 ITPMs, and I
Mm-hmm.
was like, oh, this just takes the notes.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden, fast forward 9 months, and like I haven't seen a dang ITPM wreck in a long time around the DFW area with some of my folks I've worked with.
Yeah.
But I get, are you scared at all, Andrew? Are you thrilled about it? What's your philosophy on this AI coming our way?
Well, I try not to live with the FUD side. There's a great video on YouTube called "We Are Not Ready for Artificial General Intelligence." It's about 34 minutes long. It's based on a white paper called AI 2027 that was written by a bunch of super smart guys in Silicon Valley who helped to build some of the AI companies that are out there today. I recommend that you watch that. A little scary, but fairly realistic about what's going to happen over the next couple of years with it. So what I'm trying to see it as is an enabler. One of the things that we did at Nestle was called uh, SSDOA, simplifies, standardize, delete, offshore, and automate. And the idea was that you would always be pushing down lower value activities to either automation or offshoring or whatever the best one that you could find. And what that did is it allowed the team to focus on higher value activities. So anytime you can get an AI agent to do part of what you were doing for your job, that allows you to do more strategic stuff to think about how you can improve and do things better. A lot of cybersecurity teams are bogged down with manual activities today. Think about identity hygiene. Think about security operations. Think about GRC. Application security. A lot of these areas are ripe for AI agents to be able to help. And one of the big things is around like follow up. Like, hey, Tyler, I noticed that you're the owner of this account. What should we do with it? And then you email back and forth and you have a meeting. Well, you shouldn't need to do that anymore. You can have an agent that does all that follow up for you and then takes the action based on that thing. So, and what that does is by freeing up your team, they can now do threat hunting, or they can do, something interesting or cooler or better, and even seeing it as kind of a retention policy. So again, I'm trying to be positive about it as much as I can. That's my answer.
All
That's
right,
cool.
man.
That's cool. I'm fearful, right, for some of the businesses that focus on that level of automation, excuse me,
Yeah.
for customer interactions and customer experience. I've been
Yep.
on the receiving end of enough AI emails now that you can tell exactly what is
It's
AI.
very clear to tell now. And
Yeah,
I think companies are using this headline to do layoffs. I think it was Square that recently laid
yeah.
off, like, I don't know, 10,000 people or something like that. And I think some of that is an excuse to do a layoff.
Mhm.
But there are certainly some ways that, AI and automation can replace low level or repeatable activities. And, if companies are not starting to leverage that now, they're going to lose out to competitors who are doing the same thing. So you might as well figure out how to leverage it in a secure way. But again, I wouldn't use it as a way to fire half of your staff.
Absolutely. And I love what you said, is enablement of other activities, more high value activities. Like I look at it, we're a small 56 employee company, and we leverage AI, but it's never where it actually interacts with the customer itself.
Yep.
The other value, those other activities, like you said, they're lower value, like the automation of invoicing. customers don't need to know how an invoice was generated, but there needs to be someone there to explain it to them if
Yep.
they do have questions.
Human touch is still needed, I think.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why I go back to what you said earlier, like being in the skilled trades is going out and talking to these students now in seventh, eighth, and ninth grade, and really talking about the skilled trades is something that is almost with certainty going to be there in 10 years, right?
Yeah.
Until more automation comes in. And I love what you said. I mean, changes can be scary, you know, and I think there's a lot of misconceptions as to what AI truly is. And I've heard it from enough leaders and CEOs that everybody wants it, but no one really knows where to apply it. And that just really speaks to me that they haven't really gotten out of their office much, right? They haven't really understood what Betty does down in bookkeeping that could be potentially automated.
Yeah.
When you are stepping in, so you've had several other careers now since Nestle. When you're stepping into that team and meeting your team for the first time, walk us through that process for you. Like, what do you look at? Because you are a change agent. As somebody that looking at the agile, you know, start at 80%, but you're brand new. You're still formulating some of those relationships. You're building that trust. How do you do that, and what does that usually look like for you?
So I guess I'll talk about it two different ways. So in the last two organizations, I have been the first cybersecurity hire at all. So it's not meeting a team. But let's back up a little bit. So there's a great book called The First 90 Days.
Yep, I've
I'm
read
sure
that.
you guys have heard of that one. And part of that first 90 days is he comes out with a template of what you should do in the first 30, 60, 90. I share that with my leader. Sometimes I share that during the interview or something to say, here's what I'm going to do in the first 90 days. So a lot of that is about listening and figuring out what's going on. What I did in my first in my first role after Nestle is I really started to look at how do we extract the maximum amount of value from what we're doing today. So looking at all the vendors and all the tools that we have and seeing what capabilities we have, looking at the team and seeing what skills we have and what gaps we have in terms of being able to leverage those things, and then kind of squeezing the maximum value out of those things before doing it. At both of the veterinary organizations, it's really looking at what is being done in IT overall and how security is part of that. I think in both organizations, one of the things that I've done is stood up operations where you have security tools that are firing alerts, but nobody looking at or acting upon any of those alerts. So, you know, getting a partner, you know, an MDR partner who will actually look at all the things that are coming in and then fix the problems that are happening. I think those are kind of powerful things to look at. But what I would say is every organization is unique. Each one will have different level of gaps. I always do self-assessments using a CIS-18. I do those regularly with myself. I do those regularly with my team to be able to say, look, are we focusing on the biggest gaps? I think the real job of a CISO is being a cybersecurity subject matter expert for the organization and being a ruthless prioritizer. Because you have a finite amount of resources, and I don't care if you're the CISO of Bank of America or a 100-person tech shop, you still have a finite amount of resources, a finite budget, and you need to figure out how to be spending your time in the most valuable way to reduce the most risk for your org.
How do you manage your time? Because I think there's a component of that, right? I think there is this prioritization of tasks, right? Or what's high importance, what's low importance. And I've just noticed it across my team and teams that I've been on before is it's like procrastination on some of those high value priorities. And then we fall behind because we say time management. Where is that balance? Where's that blend for you? And what lessons have you learned? Because I think, like you said, in your role, it's sink or swim when it becomes those prioritization and what ones you're choosing to work on first.
So, I mean, I think just as you need to ruthlessly manage your resources and your budget, you need to ruthlessly manage your time. I need to give the right amount of time and prioritize time with my leader. I need to prioritize time with my peers. I need to prioritize time with my team. I need to prioritize time with my business partners, right? Like in legal or finance or whatever. And I need to prioritize time with my partners to make sure that they're getting what they need from me and I'm getting what I need from them. So I think, going across those kind of 5 areas and making sure that those things are protected. And you may have other things that you need to do. Maybe every once in a while you join a podcast or you hear a pitch from a new vendor or something like that. Those are important things to do too, to engage with your community. But really prioritizing those things and making sure that you make your commitments, that you don't reschedule those things or delete those things or whatever. And I think having availability is really important too, because something urgent or important is always going to show up. So if you don't have some kind of secret blocks of your calendar that you're saving that you can give to those super urgent things, or also time to strategize and think and prioritize the next day and all that. Those are important things to do too. Secretly, I get on my PC every night about 8 p.m. when my wife is putting my son to bed, and I look at what happened today and kind of reflect on the day. I look at what's going to happen tomorrow. I get prepared for the next day. And if I don't do that, which sometimes you can't, you have an evening engagement or whatever, but if I don't do that, I really feel it the next day, because that preparation and that reflection, I think, are really key.
Yeah, I hear you. I feel like that's when I'm playing off the back foot, right? Not days starts to attack me, and that's how one of our past guests really put it perfectly. And Danielle was attack the day, otherwise the day is going to attack you. And
Exactly.
preparation in that department is always when I feel better. When I'm walking in, not really sure what I have on my calendar, it's like, oh, you're playing catch up pretty much.
Yeah,
It reminds me of the phrase from Mike Tyson, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face.
Yes,
But it's actually flipped around a little bit, right? So having a plan will avoid you from getting punched in the face by what's going to happen today.
Exactly.
Man, and I sleep better at night because every time I look at my calendar for the next day too, and it's just not to wake up with the fire alarm. And and we're coming up to the top of the hour, Andrew, and I just wanted to ask, what's been the most exciting stretch of your career in your lifetime here? Is there one point in your life that you were just humming on all cylinders?
I really have to say, like, the last 18 months. VetCore is an amazing organization. When I interviewed, one of my peers who was interviewing me at the time said, we have a strict no assholes policy. And I kind of laughed at him. And then I realized afterwards, like, he was serious. Like, there really is a no assholes policy. So I love being on Team VetCore. One of the things I do is I go to 2 veterinary conferences each year, and I go to the booth. I work the booth at those conferences, right? I'm not having meetings with vendors or whatever. I'm at the booth talking to our vets, talking to our veterinary technicians, talking to the hospital managers. And when I tell them, hey, I do cybersecurity for VetCore, it leads to very interesting conversations. So being able to have those kind of depth of understanding of your customer or your partners, that's really valuable to me. And I mean, it's a great organization. Everybody here is awesome.
Do you feel like that's where you're pulling some, like, innovation, like, where you wouldn't have before, is, like, from those
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll take those things back to my team and say, like, hey, people are perceiving this in this way. This has a really negative connotation. This is really positive. This year we'll do phishing training for the first time. And I think being able to go to a conference after that happens and seeing, what people thought of that or how they felt or things like that, I think that will give a lot of valuable insight.
Yeah, that's the ability to remove
data, I think
remove that pride. Otherwise, you can stay in that echo chamber.
Yes.
And it's easier to stay in that echo chamber and think of, like, yeah, everything we're doing is fantastic, but until you actually get it from the horse's mouth, it's
You want to have like an Abraham Lincoln board of directors kind of thing. So what he did is he brought all of the people that were against him philosophically and politically, and that was his board who he bounced stuff off. And so that's who you want to have. Is you want to have people who are going to tell you no. You want to have people who are going to disagree with you. We have an agreement in our IT executive group that is what is it called? Like the obligation to dissent. So whenever someone says something or there's an idea or something, you're obligated to disagree with them and come up with an alternative as to why or something like that. So that way you really have meaningful discussions, and everything is just, yep, that sounds great. Let's do that. Yep, let's do that. Because, people feel empowered to be able to speak up.
Yeah, and then they'll dig their heels in an hour after that meeting and be like, "Why the hell are we doing this?"
Yep. You gotta say what you want, guys. Gotta be decisive.
Exactly.
That's what I know about Andrew Wilder, everybody. Yeah, the decisiveness is awesome, and it's refreshing too. Your average American, you ask them what their favorite something is, they say, "Oh, I like about everything." They don't just come out and say, "Hell's bells" or whatever, or "Thunderstruck." I think we're embarrassed to say what we like, and it's just like I said, Andrew, refreshing meeting a new friend here that knows exactly what he's about, and I think that's a skill in itself. If you don't see it in yourself, I'm telling you it. So,
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
yeah, man. And that's who we like to have on the show, Andrew. We used to chase titles, and now it's kind of like, well, you have a cool title, but are you kind of cool in your own way? But it's been a blast, man. And if you want to sign off on anything else, if you want to let the crowd know anything else about you, Andrew, this is your time. If you have any mantra of the day or want to sign off, this is your stage.
Well, I just like to thank Tyler and Kevin for the opportunity. Nothing crazy to plug here, but it's been a wonderful time. I really enjoyed the conversation, guys. Thanks a lot.
Dude, sounds good, man.
Thank you, Andrew.
And